But obviously for the NFC, we got Tampa Bay hosting Philadelphia. Parker, this is a very interesting matchup here.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot because the way I see it, this game, two things. First, I'll start with I feel like this matchup is against two very very different quarterbacks with very different play styles. One is obviously nearly 45 years old and has virtually no mobility, and then obviously we got Jalen Hurts, the young QB who is kind of impressing a lot of people in the NFL this year. Who obviously uses his mobility to kind of strengthen his game as a whole. I think he was second in the league in rushing touchdowns. Or maybe he was first.
I believe he was first. He's been rolling.
Yeah, his legs are truly one of the biggest weapons of any quarterback in the entire league. So that's definitely something we're going to be talking about here in this breakdown. The other thing I want to talk about just quickly before we get started, Parker, this game gives me eerily similar vibes, like eerily similar vibes to last year's Bucs and Washington game, where
I do not disagree.
Where Taylor Heineke started in place of
Alex Smith.
Oh yeah, it was Alex Smith. I couldn't remember who it was. But yeah, the Bucs ended up winning that game, but it was a lot closer than what people thought going into the game, which is expected because Taylor Heineke was starting. But Jalen Hurts is obviously better than Taylor Heineke, and I think this Eagles team is better than that Washington team. So Parker, I think you got an interesting take for this game. I'll let you start for this breakdown of Tampa Bay and Philadelphia.
Well, as we know, you cannot go through a super wildcard weekend or a normal wildcard weekend. There always has to be an upset. It's the way the NFL works.
There's always a big one. There's always a big one that shocks people.
It cannot go exactly the way the seating suggests. Last year, the only really major one, to my knowledge, there was the Rams beating the Seahawks, which was close, but seeding predicted it, and then there was the Browns upsetting the Steelers, which again was visible, but was still surprising to a lot of people, especially in the fashion it was. And I think I've been looking through these games, and I can't get over how much this smells like an upset to me.
Really?
And I don't. It's not much more than a feeling, but it does feel, like you said, insanely similar to Bucs Washington last year, and they almost blew that. And while I am a bigger Taylor
that was the
Heineke
closest
believer,
game. That was the closest game that Tampa Bay had. For the entire Buccaneers playoff run, because they absolutely dominated the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and then they played the Saints, which was not that. It was a little hard, but not really.
And then the Packers was close, but not as close as Washington.
No, the Washington game was legit. There was a real chance that Washington was going to pull it off. Obviously Brady pulled it out in the end.
But yeah. I feel very similarly about this one, where I think it actually feels so similar because look at Taylor Heineke. What we know about him now is he's a bit of a gunslinger. He can be a bit mistake prone, but when he is zoned in, he is a legitimate quarterback, and that's very similar to how I feel about Jalen Hurts. Except I think Jalen Hurts is probably better in that Jalen has a more refined arm than he did last season. Like you said, his legs are insanely skillful. His footwork is excellent. He can break the ankles of a decent cornerback. He can make deep runs when he needs to, but he can also sling it downfield. And he has been a big proponent of a very dominant run game, which, although Tampa's D-line is great, I don't know how they're going to deal with such a strong run team. With such a strong mobile quarterback, because we haven't seen them really have to deal with that in this NFC that is largely dominated by older, less versatile QBs. We're seeing that shift slowly now, but if you look at the majority of the NFC, it is dominated by the old guard of QBs, whereas the AFC is kind of the new guard.
Don't forget about Kyler. I mean, Kyler.
Oh, I'm not forgetting about Kyler, but come on, name another. Russ doesn't really count because he's moonball.
Oh, come on. I mean, Stafford's mobile. I mean, Trey Lance is kind of mobile. I mean, yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. I think even though I agree with you, I mean, I'm the one who brought it up. I feel like this game gives me definitely eerily similar vibes to the Bucs and Washington game last season. I still feel like the Buccaneers probably have I mean, not probably. They definitely do have the upper hand in this matchup. particularly
100%.
because the strengths of the Eagles, which, like you said, are the running game and the mobility from both the quarterback and also Philadelphia is definitely one of those teams with it seems as though whatever running back they put back there is obviously going to have a decent game. But like you said a little bit, this Tampa Bay rush defense is elite. Like everything that Philadelphia does well, I feel like Tampa Bay pretty much has a decent counterpunch to that. And also, I don't know how this Philadelphia Eagles secondary or defense in general is going to be able to hold Tampa Bay under 30 points, just honestly, because and there's a couple of reasons why. One, Tampa Bay is getting healthier, and that's obviously scary for the NFL. Mike Evans is back. I know they lost Chris Godwin due to a torn ACL, but the Buccaneers have 6 other guys they can throw in there that can be just as effective, it seems like. They can throw in Perryman. They can throw in Scotty Miller. They can throw in Gronk. I mean, they have so many different versatile weapons. It's honestly ridiculous. And here's I think the biggest stat that's glaring to me in terms of Philadelphia stopping this air raid offense of Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. The Eagles are arguably the worst team in the entire league, Parker, in covering tight ends. They are last in receptions, they're 27th in yards, and they're dead last in touchdowns. And even though Gronk is obviously past the prime of his career, I feel like this is definitely a game in which Brady is going to want to get Gronk. He's going to want to get Gronk involved so that more teams are going to have to worry about him as the playoffs go on.
Yes.
So I see Gronk having a pretty big game here. Brady has been good virtually all year. He's had some down moments, but Brady still in the MVP conversation at 44 years old is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. I'm honestly not going to overthink this one, Parker. I'm just going to give you a straight up prediction. I got the Bucs rolling the Eagles in this one, 38-21. Bucs move on to the divisional round. What do you got for me though?
I think that is the biggest blowout we've had this episode so far.
It is
from either of us. Now, I will say I totally agree with everything you said. And I got to bring up some of the knocks against the Eagles before I talk about some of the good stuff. You are right. They are a very they're a very bad team, is sometimes in their rush defense and sometimes in their in a little bit of their secondary. And also, just to bring up another thing, Jalen Hurts is a second-year starter. Devontae Smith, their number one wide receiver, is a rookie, and Nick Sirianni is a first-year head coach. These are all things that will count against them in big moments.
Yeah, lack of playoff experience. We were just talking about that with Cincinnati. Lack of playoff experience is definitely present here as well.
And I think it's more of a stinger. It has potential to be more of a stinger here than it would be for Cincinnati. And I acknowledge all of that. Now, in saying that, I think there are 2 players who are not being talked about enough in this game that could be huge for this Eagles team. I know you had in your notes, big play Slay, Darius Slay, has been a monster for this Eagles secondary. He has been a saving grace for them multiple times. He, unlike, we're going to talk about Trayvon Diggs a little later when we get to the Cowboys, he gives me some of that vibe in terms of his big play ability because he's had a couple pick sixes this year, but he doesn't get burned as easily as Trayvon Diggs does. He is an extremely physical corner, and I think he has the potential to make a big play, especially since Tom Brady has shown that if they can get any kind of pass rush on him, he can make a mistake that could change this game. And the other player that I think is a big deal in this game, and I just mentioned him, is Devontae Smith. We knew coming out of Alabama, people were concerned about his size, but he has shown this year that he is a valid and versatile and a severe threat to any team, especially someone like the Bucs who has a not amazing secondary. They have a good secondary, but is it great enough to deal with one of the most elite route runners out of the last couple draft classes, in my opinion? I'm definitely not saying that the Eagles can lock in this win. I think this is going to be an absolute fight, and I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But I think the Bucs can get caught off guard here. So I'm going to go Bucs 31, Eagles 34. Field goal game.
So you got the Eagles in the upset.
I'm going to take the Eagles in the upset. I think it has to happen this weekend. The next game we're going to talk about, I am also taking the upset, but it doesn't feel like an upset to me because of the way these seasons have gone. So
my upset. Before we move on, let me just ask you. Let me just clarify. You think Philadelphia is going to go on the road? You think Philadelphia is going to go on the road with Jalen Hurts, a second year quarterback, with Nick Sirianni, a first year head coach, with Devonta Smith, who is a rookie wide receiver, as their top receiver, and they're going to upset the reigning Super Bowl champions?
The reason I am willing to say it, because I am reluctant, because I understand that it's nuts. This is playoff Tom Brady. This is arguably the best quarterback of all time, and not many people are against that argument anymore now that he has left Belichick and won another Super Bowl. I truly think that those injuries and this AB stuff has taken more of a toll on the team than they are ever going to be willing to admit. Let's keep in mind, it has been only 2 weeks since AB walked off the field and has been attacking the team. And while I think Tom Brady is a verbal leader and can try to keep them together, they've also been gutted by injuries. And I don't know if what's his name? Fournette's going to be back. I think he is, but he's still hurt. Like you said, Godwin being hurt isn't as big a deal because they still have Mike Evans and Gronk, but that's a factor. And I believe there's someone else that I'm forgetting that's also on the injury list. Tell me if I am, but this is a team that is hurting right now.